Hi Year 11s, we're going to be looking at our second video now, which is animal classification. So we're going to be looking into the 5 different kingdoms, we're going to be looking into vertebrates, invertebrates, plants, and all the different groups that we have inside those. One thing that's really important in this slide is there is a lot of information. I would recommend that you're going to be reading it and you're going to be pulling out the key information, probably not going to be writing everything down. There is a lot of information. Feel free to write it all down, but remember, as I've said before, generally you get a better understanding and end up with better results if you're taking what I'm saying, you're looking at what's written on the screen, and you're putting it into your own words. If you're just copying word for word, there's no interpreting that information in your own mind, and you're not going to remember it as well. So with that in mind, let's start. So first off, the 5 kingdoms. So these are basically consisting of all animals across the globe. We have 5 kingdoms. We have the prokaryote kingdom, the protoctist kingdom, the fungi kingdom, the plant kingdom, and the animal kingdom. The prokaryote kingdom can only be seen with light microscopes. They are single-celled organisms. They have a cell wall. They do not have a proper nucleus. When we're talking about prokaryotes, we're going to be talking about organisms such as bacteria. Protoctist kingdom, a little bit different. We're looking at single-celled animals as well as many-celled organisms in this category. They do contain a proper nucleus, and they can usually be seen with low power on a microscope. Generally, they live in soil and water, and we'll generally refer to those as things like algae. The fungi kingdom, most of those are multicellular organisms. A main example of a single-celled one is yeast. And what they do is they consist of a network of mycelium of fine threads called hyphae, which in terms of mushrooms and toadstools makes up the root system underneath the mushroom or toadstool. Those threads are interwoven together, and that will make mushrooms and toadstools. The plant kingdom consists of, again, multicellular organisms that will make their own food through photosynthesis. They contain chlorophyll. Shouldn't need to give an example of plant kingdoms. Obviously, it's going to include flowers, trees, bushes, etc. Animal kingdom, again, multicellular organisms, but this time these are animals that are going to feed on other organisms and not create their own food. They will consist of a nervous system, they'll move around, and they're going to be separated into 2 distinct groups, animals with backbones and animals without backbones. Again, shouldn't have to give you many examples for those. I'm sure you can think of them off the top of your head. We will be looking at some of these in more detail, specifically the plant and animal kingdom, and that's what the remainder of this PowerPoint will be about. So first we'll start with the plant, and there are 4 main classes of plants that we look at. There's mosses and liverworts, there's ferns, there's conifers, and there's flowering plants. Mosses and liverworms are plants that have no proper roots or stems. They also contain no vascular tissue, so xylem, phloems, etc. They have very simple leaves and leaf-like forms, and they're found in damp places. They'll generally reproduce using spores, which are formed in a capsule and then released. Ferns, on the other hand, do have proper roots and stems, and they create leaf-like fronds that contain vascular tissue. Again, these will be found in damp places, and they'll reproduce with spores that are formed under the fronds of which are the leaves. Those spores will be found in clusters called sori or storas. Conifers, on the other hand, very large plants. Again, they're going to have proper roots and stems, but they're going to reproduce based on seeds and seed-bearing cones. Conifers are also classified as evergreen, and that's exactly what it sounds like. An evergreen plant is a plant that is green all year round. It doesn't change its colour, it stays green the entire year. Lastly, we have flowering plants, and this is where we're going to start looking at our dicots and monocots. Wide range of plants. They're going to have seed-bearing flowers for reproduction, and their seeds are generally protected inside of fruit. They can be anything from small herbs to massive trees, so there's a very large group of plants there. There are your 4 main categories of plants, and that's the last time I'm going to probably talk about plants in this PowerPoint, so rest easy. We also have the vertebrates, so the animal kingdom, and these are animals with backbones. None of these should be new to you. You've been looking at these since you were in primary school. But we just need to have in our minds the underlying characteristics of these animals. So fish. Fish are animals that are covered with scales. They have gills for breathing and fins for movement. They sometimes will have a skeleton made of cartilage, like rays and sharks, because it's light and allows them to glide through the water easily. But some also have skeletons made of bones. Obviously, all fish live in water. Amphibians, they don't have scales anymore, but they have soft skin. They live on land when they're in their adult form, but they will also live in water and lay eggs in water when they are in their larvae form or tadpole form, which leads on that they have two distinct life stages. They will start life as a tadpole, which is their larva form, and they will eventually change to adult. Tadpoles have gills to allow them to live in water, but as they change or morph into their adult form, they lose those gills and they start to develop lungs so they can live on land. Reptiles, they have hard, tough skin. Again, we've gone back to the form of having scales now. Still laying eggs, this time they're laying soft shell eggs, but these eggs are laid on land. All of these animals will have lungs for breathing on land, no matter what stage of life they are in. Birds have skin, but they have feathers. They don't have scales, obviously, they have feathers instead. These start to lay hard shell eggs, and they have wings for flying, beaks for feeding, and again they have lungs. An interesting characteristic of birds is out of all of these 5 different categories of vertebrate animals, birds are one of only 2 of the groups that are warm-blooded, so they control their own body temperature. They're endotherms, not ectotherms. Mammals are the other group, consisting of us, that are endotherms. They have skin with hair, and they develop young inside their mother, so there's no laying eggs anymore. And they're fed milk from mammary glands once they are born. Lungs and warm-blooded. Now, I've tried to, for each of these, put in yellow the key features that help identify them. Obviously, there are some that are going to overlap, but these are the key ways of doing it. Another interesting note about this slide is generally these are in the order that they've evolved from. So fish would have evolved much earlier on than mammals have evolved. And you can tell that by some of their features. So we've started to move from living in water to living on water and land, to moving entirely on land, to being warm-blooded, to being able to no longer lay eggs and actually care for your young inside the mother until they are born. So in terms of evolution, this slide's going down that way as well. This is the slide that most of these animals will be completely brand new to you. So these are all the animals in the animal kingdom that do not have a backbone. So these are the invertebrates. I've gone through 7 on this slide of the main invertebrates that you might be tested on. Bear in mind that these 7 are not the only 7. These are just 7 of the key invertebrates. So we start with cnidarians. Cnidarians are very simple. They have a sac-like body with tentacles, and they have stinging cells called cnidae. Hence, the animal's called cnidarians, because they have those stinging cells called cnidae. And a good example of a cnidarian is a jellyfish, as we've got in the top picture over here. We have flatworms as well. Flatworms have long, flat, elongated bodies, and most of these are parasitic or parasites, and you can see an example of these in the diagram over here. Roundworms, these are your parasitic worms, mostly. Some will live in soil, that have round, elongated bodies, hence the name roundworms. These are not earthworms. These are roundworms, so do not classify an earthworm as a roundworm. An earthworm is actually an annelid, and it's Classified as an annelid because it has a long body that's divided into rings or a series of segments. They have chaetae, which assist in motion. Most annelids are aquatic, but some, like your earthworms, will live in soil. Mollusks. Mollusks have a soft, unsegmented body, and they're usually covered by a shell. Usually. There are some key mollusks that are a little bit different that you may not consider as being mollusks. So a typical mollusk is a snail. It's got a soft, unsegmented body, and it's got a shell. Now, obviously a slug, very similar. Slug going to be a soft, unsegmented body, but it's not covered by a shell. There's your two alternate. Squids, cuttlefish, all those animals, they're also mollusks. So that's a nice example of the variety of animals we have in the mollusk group. Echinoderms. Echinoderms are animals that have their body based on 5 parts, and they'll radiate out like a star and have spines. Now, spines not in the term of backbone. Spines is in the term of pointy spines sticking out of their body. Obviously, a very good example of those are starfish, as can be seen here. Arthropods is the most important invertebrate group that we have. They are the most abundant class of animal on Earth. They consist of a very large amount of animals. We're talking about, you've got crabs, you've got yabbies, you've got flies, you've got bees, you've got spiders. It's a very large range of animals. They will have a segmented body, usually into 3 parts, and they will have a hard exoskeleton on the outside of their body. So basically an arthropod is anything with an outside skeleton hard around their body. They mostly will have antennae, they'll mostly have compound eyes, so multiple lenses in their one eye that will all gather different pictures to make one big picture. Some will have spiracles. But arthropods are a very important part of the invertebrate group. This system that we have for classification is the binomial system. So this is, in the last video I talked about, for example, Homo sapiens, and specifically how the genus and species were written. And that's a very important part of classification. All of this is the binomial system, and it's based on a method devised by Carl Linnaeus in his very first book called Systema Naturae, which you can see the cover of on the left there. In this system, the binomial system, as the name suggests, each animal is given 2 names. The first name is the species genus, and the second name is its species. So we are Homo sapiens. Homo is our genus, sapiens is our species. Always, when you write a scientific name, so you're giving me the genus and the species, always you must write it in a specific format, otherwise you will lose marks, otherwise it looks like you don't understand classification. Always, the genus is given a capital letter, the species is not. You also have either the whole 2 names, genus and species, written in italics. If you can't do that because you're handwriting, then you underline the name. But, so, both names, genus and species, have to be either in italics or underlined. The genus must have a capital letter, the species must not. In order to help classify animals, we will use a key. Some of the things on this PowerPoint you're not going to do. So, for example, I'm not interested in you making a key based on your pencil case. We will use some keys in classrooms, but don't worry about that. One of the keys we use is a spider key, which is the one on the right here. And basically, it's just a series of questions with normally 2 answers that you can choose from that will allow you to, for example, I have an unknown species. I don't know what this is here, so I'll go through the key and ask questions. So is it a plastic or is it wood? Oh, it's plastic. Does it contain paper inside? Does it not contain paper? It contains paper. Oh, therefore it must be a packet of tissues. Okay, things like that. Spider keys generally you won't use. They're not very scientific. Dichotomous keys you will. So a dichotomous key consists of pairs of questions about living organisms, and those paired questions are numbered. Each of the pairs will have describing alternate descriptions of a characteristic. So for example, I might have this cat, the animal has 4 legs, or the animal has 2 legs. If it has 4 legs, it could either be a dog or a cat or a goat or a horse. If it has 2 legs, it could be a gorilla, it could be a human, it could be... And you start to narrow down your choices with each question you get to. At the very end, you'll get to the exact species that you're looking for. We're going to look at this in class in a lot more detail, and we will go through dichotomous keys in class this week. So you'll get to practice this